Perdue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for your career of service. Obviously, North Korea is a rogue regime. Admiral Harris, the PACCOM commander, I had the privilege of meeting with him back in August, talked about the seriousness of the North Korean situation and how unpredictable it is. They're definitely a rogue regime. They're developing programs of weapons of mass destruction and nuclear, biological, chemical weaponry. Their cyber warfare efforts are certainly known to us now after the Sony incident just last year. I'm worried about their nuclear proliferation efforts with Iran, but also the human rights violations are untenable. Solzhenitsyn wrote a book a long time ago about his experience in the gulags of the Soviet Union, and yet what we have going on in Korea today in the 21st century, in 2015, is just unconscionable. Ambassador Kim, I'd like to talk to you about North Korea's efforts with Iran and the proliferation. We know that Iran has had people at each of the 3 tests, and North Korea is now talking about their 4th test. And yet we had just recently a senior American official said, and I quote, "It's very possible that North Korea is now testing for 2 countries, implying that they're in direct cooperation with Iran." After the Iran deal, nuclear deal, I'm very concerned about that proliferation effort. Can you speak to that and what we're doing about that as an administration?
Thank you very much, Senator. We have long been very concerned about North Korea's relations with Iran. We know that they have cooperated on various projects, and this is something that we monitor very closely. Obviously, we need to stay vigilant and make sure that such dealings are terminated.
Well, how do we do that? I mean, we've got these sanction programs now that are being released. Iran has a lot of cash. With our sanctions on North Korea needs cash. Are we monitoring that, that situation more closely now that we've signed the Iran deal?
Sir, our experts are monitoring the situation very, very closely, yes.
Okay. Monitoring, do you expect any change in current behavior?
So I mean, I was not involved in the Iran deal, so I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that Iran obviously has an interest in living up to the deal and following through in order for them to reap the benefits of any sanctions waiver.
But our sanctions on North Korea, of which I was speaking, are really not having much of an impact on their ability to ship technology. I mean, we just had North Korea expert Bruce Bechtel wrote just early this year, quote, "North Korea continues to supply technology, components, and even raw materials for Iran's highly enriched uranium weaponization program." So it baffles me that we're quite happy with the status quo in terms of the effectiveness or lack thereof of our sanctions relative to this proliferation partnership they seem to have with Iran.
Sir, I mean, I don't think anybody is happy with the state of the situation with North Korea. Sanctions enforcement has improved, and we've had some successes in terms of ship interdictions, which has made it more difficult for the North Koreans to proliferate, and I believe that applies to the Iran situation as well.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador King, on this forced labor issue, you know, today it's hard to, you know, we've had hearings here about human slavery in the 21st century, 27 million people enslaved around the world. The Database Center of North Korean Human Rights, NKDB, recently released a new report about North Korea's overseas efforts. This report paints an abysmal picture of the state of forced labor sent to work overseas by the Kim regime. Some 60,000 laborers overseas have been sent, earning somewhere between $1 billion and $2.5 billion on behalf of the state in terms of hard currency for North Korea. Can you speak to this policy? This is a policy that I'm not sure many Americans are aware of, and what we're, as an administration, what are we doing? I mean, North Korea is a Tier 3, one of 23, I guess, Tier 3 countries out there, probably the worst participant in this forced labor movement around the world, but for hard currency. I continue to come back to the money flow. We've got all these sanctions on North Korea, and yet they're seeking ways to get hard currency, and here is one way they're being very successful. Can you speak to that, please?
The NKDV data is somewhat suspect, and I can send you some information that suggests that 1 to 1.5 billion is way too high.
Okay.
There is concern about North Korean laborers who are working. There are indications, we don't have numbers, there are indications there are significant numbers of them in Russia where they work in the in the lumber industry. There are workers in China where they work in the textile industry.
Are they forced? These are forced? Are they prisoners?
You know, forced, yes and no. I mean, this is not a situation where people are rounded up and told you're going to work in the lumber camps in Russia. It's individuals are told they have an opportunity to go. Quite frankly, for most North Koreans, working abroad provides better living conditions than staying in North Korea. They're better fed. They aren't paid as much as they would be if they were hired locally. They're not, but they are better paid than if they stayed in North Korea. So, I mean, it's one of these kind of things that it's a signal of, an indication of the problems in North Korea that these kind of things go on. We have raised the issue and we're monitoring the issue where countries that are allies of ours have North Korean laborers. We're very concerned about making sure they realize what they're doing, but most of the laborers tend to be in places like Russia and China, very few of them in Western countries.
Do many of those workers ever make it back to North Korea?
From what we know, yes. They usually spend 2 or 3 years abroad and then they return.
Is there any correlation between those workers and the camps, the detention camps inside North Korea?
Doesn't seem to be. People who are sent to the prison camps are not being sent abroad.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.